Screencast 5, Unions. This one's going to be relatively short. I'm hoping. I realized that the other ones were a little bit on the longish side. And it's tough for me because I'm trying to make them as short as possible while still giving yous all the information you need to know. So I'll stop whining now and let's start talking about unions. So here's what a typical union might look like. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not a particularly big fan of unions, and you can feel free to pause the video and read this to see why. This is a letter I got because I'm part of the teachers union at Dyna. And this is how much I pay each year. They're probably going to be pissed that I'm sharing this, but this is how much I pay each year to be a part of the union. And I don't really have a choice. When I became a teacher, I learned that I could either choose to be in the union and pay this amount, or many years ago, the state legislature passed a law that essentially said that if I choose not to be in the union, they can still charge me something like 90 or 95% of this amount. So when I talked to the union representative when I took this job here, I said, I see that it costs this much to be in the union, and I have to pay you almost as much even if I'm not in the union. So what do I get if I'm in the union? And what she said is, well, you get all sorts of other kinds of benefits. I was like, oh, like what? She's like, well, one benefit is that if you get killed on school property, you get more life insurance. I was like, that's my benefit. And she's like, yep. So just so you guys know, if you're thinking of taking me down, try to do it on school property. My wife and my kids will appreciate it. So anyway, now that I've ranted a little bit, let's talk about unions. We're going to talk about unions in the context of a perfectly competitive labor market, just to keep things simple supply and demand of workers and demand for workers. And we're going to talk about what unions do and in trying to get their members to get paid more. I should probably mention what a union is. A union is a collection of workers who come together and bargain as one. So instead of going to a firm and me individually negotiating with them about what my pay should be or what my hours should be, what a union does is basically collectively bargains for its members. It's kind of a way to pool the power of the workers so that you're not all individual workers. All right, so let's talk about the market for hamburger flippers. Again, we have the supply, that's us, right? And more of us will show up to work at higher wages. We have the demand, that's the business's demand for workers. And if we let the market go to work, we'll get a certain price of a worker, we call that the wage. We'll get a certain quantity of workers. Now, the first thing that unions do, or the first model they pursue in order to get paid more, is called the demand enhancement model. And what this model says is that you should increase the demand, or the MRP, of workers by doing one of a number of things, and unions try to do all these things. First, by increasing product demand. Sometimes you'll see commercials on television to buy a product that are sponsored by the unions of the workers that produce that product. Alternatively, you can increase the demand for workers by increasing the marginal product of the workers, so putting them through training programs or helping them get college educations, and unions do that as well. Or third, you can try to increase the demand for a certain resource by increasing the price of substitute resources. So if we're talking about, electrical workers, what a union might do is make it harder for other people to be electrical workers. That increases the demand for the electrical workers that exist. All of these things are essentially an attempt to increase the demand for the worker. And if you increase the demand for workers, you can see what happens graphically. Not only do you get more workers and more jobs, but the price or the wage that they get paid is going to wind up going up. So that's called the demand enhancement model, and teachers' unions do this. They put teachers through training programs, that kind of stuff. You'll recall that MRP is equal to marginal product times price of the product. So what the union's trying to do is increase one of those two things, the marginal productivity of the workers or the price of the product itself. That increases marginal revenue product, it increases the demand for the workers, and as a result, they get paid more. Now, the other option is called the exclusive or craft model, and teachers' unions do this as well. The idea here is to reduce the supply of workers by doing any number of things, maybe restrictive membership policies, restricting the labor supply of the economy as a whole, or maybe requiring licensing. Any of those things would reduce the supply of how many people could work in that job. So take the teachers union, for example. I was an economics major in college, at an Ivy League college, and I mentioned that just to say that I'm qualified. I went to law school and I took many, many economics classes in law school. Nevertheless, when I wanted to be a teacher, even though I felt that I knew a lot about economics, I had to go get a teacher's license, which meant going back to school to take nonsensical classes, to be honest, just to show that I had this license. So I went back to a couple of community colleges around here when I decided to become a teacher, and I learned all sorts of things. For example, do you know what the Magna Carta is? You think it's that document, right, from way ago? You're wrong. What I learned in my teacher licensure program is that the Magna Carta was one of Columbus's three ships. And when I learned this in class, I kind of raised my hand and I said, I'm pretty sure that it's not one of Columbus's three ships. And the professor said, no, it is. And then I got to the final exam and there was the question, what are Columbus's three ships? And I answered it, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Magna Carta. And I did very well on that test. So I'm a little bit bitter about the whole licensing thing, because I kind of feel like I was qualified. And in fact, in the economy, there's lots of jobs that require licenses. You need a license to be a hairdresser. You need a license to be a funeral director. Like, what can they mess up? You need a license to do all sorts of things. And why do we have these licenses? Well, the industry, the professions will tell you we have these licenses to make sure that they're qualified. What I'll tell you is that in a lot of these industries, we require these licenses because what the unions are trying to do is reduce the supply of who can be in these jobs. And by reducing the supply, you could see what would happen. The price goes up. The people who actually have those jobs are going to get paid more. Now, I consider this to be a little bit evil because notice also what happens to the quantity. The quantity goes down. So what the unions are doing are making it harder to work in these jobs so that they could get paid more at the expense of some people losing jobs or us not having as many jobs as we would otherwise have. All right, so I'm a little bit bitter about unions. Don't let that skew your view of unions. In some cases, like in the demand enhancement model, yeah, it seems like a good deal. Quantity of workers and the wage that they get paid goes up. But in other situations, to me, it seems just a little bit slightly evil. All right, that's it for unions. One more to go.
Honey, or let's go play.
I don't feel like it.
Why are you always in such a bad mood?
I have a nail in my anus.